Antarctica is a place of mysteries and isolation. Because it is situated on the Earth's south pole, it has an extremely cold climate and is covered with a huge ice cap. Unlike the North Pole, which is an ocean surrounded by land, Antarctica is a piece of land surrounded by ocean. It is separated from the rest of the planet by over 2,000 miles of sea. Continental Antarctica is encircled by a belt of sea ice that fluctuates with the seasons, making navigation difficult and dangerous. This ice was first spotted by the British explorer Captain James Cook in 1774, and the first confirmed landing was only achieved in 1895 by the New Zealander Alonzo Tunzelman. The Norwegian Roald Amundsen was the first historically recognized person to step onto the South Pole on the 14th of December 1911. His rival, the Englishman Robert Scott, arrived a month later and died on the journey home, one of the many explorers who have made Antarctica their grave. In the early 20th century, many nations set up bases, carrying out explorations of the various places around the continent. Today, there is a transient population of scientists and their support infrastructure from about 1,000 to 5,000, depending on the time of year. Officially, nobody lives in Antarctica, and no human being ever set foot there before Tunzelman, Amundsen and Scott and so on. This makes sense from a conventional standpoint, because the continent is so inaccessible and its environment is so hostile. It has been for over 15 million years. Before then, it was much warmer and even sometimes tropical because it has moved around on the Earth's crust due to continental drift. Dinosaur bones and fossilized trees have been found there, but Antarctica has never been a place humans could thrive since our species evolved. Or at least, that's what we've been told. There have been a number of anomalous findings in Antarctica that have left people across the world scratching their heads. In 2012, some images were spotted on Google Earth of a nunatak, that is a mountain peak inside an ice cap that is tall enough to poke above it. These are very common all over Antarctica. However, this particular nunatak has a distinct shape with smooth faces and regular sides. It reminded many people of the pyramids of Egypt. Could this mountain actually be an artificial object? The skeptics say definitely not. This is a natural object and coincidentally resembles the Egyptian pyramids. It's possible for mountains to form into regular shapes, the Matterhorn in Switzerland, for example. Nunataks are more likely to be regular due to the erosion effects of glaciers. However, it is still very rare to find the level of constancy we see in this Antarctic outcrop. It is indeed eroded somewhat, but it has obviously flat facets and straight edges. In this way, it's similar to the obviously constructed artifacts on Mars, such as the face, besides which there is more than one of them. In 2016, some more pyramidal mountains were discovered on Google Earth. This time, there are 3 visible, arranged in a line like those on the Giza Plateau. These should not be dismissed as natural objects in our view, not without confirmation. The locations of these anomalies have never been visited. Even today, more than a century after Amundsen reached the South Pole, most of Antarctica has still not been fully explored. Much of it has only been examined from aircraft or satellites in space. The haste with which the Antarctic pyramids were dismissed is primarily due to the theoretical impossibility of their existence because of the above-stated reasons. Nobody could possibly have built pyramids in the freezing wasteland of Antarctica during the 120 years people have been visiting it. Even if they could, why would they? If the pyramids are indeed man-made, then there are only 2 possibilities. The first is that the transformation of Antarctica into its current frozen state happened far more recently than 15 million years ago. Albeit in prehistory, but during the time humans have walked the Earth, Antarctica was a green and pleasant land, which was home to a highly developed civilization that built huge monuments of stone. This civilization fell due to the climate change that turned their homeland to ice, forcing them to flee north. Could Antarctica really have been ice-free in the recent past? There is interesting evidence for this discovered by many researchers, most notably the American academic Charles Hapgood. A 17th century map belonging to Piri Reis, a Turkish admiral, has been found that not only is a very accurate depiction of known landmasses, but also has a segment that appears to be the coast of Antarctica directly south of Africa. What is even more amazing is that there is no indication on the map of any ice cap or a field of sea ice off its shore. The contours closely resemble the bedrock edges of the continent that were only pinned down in the 20th century when an echolocation survey was made of the coast. The map is clearly a contemporary maritime chart from Piri Reis's lifetime, but could it have been copied from other older cartographies? The idea of an archaic civilization of which we have been told nothing from recorded history is perfectly plausible. In fact, there is considerable physical evidence for its reality in the form of archaeological wonders like Göbekli Tepe, which dates from the 10th millennium BC, making it more than twice as old as the constructions of ancient Egypt. There is also evidence in the form of mythology. Almost every nationality across the globe has legends of a high culture that is suddenly destroyed, forcing its people to rise again from primitive barbarism. The best known of these myths are Noah's Ark and Atlantis. Despite many attempts, the true location of Atlantis has never been found. Could it have been in Antarctica? An alternative possibility is that Antarctica has been covered with ice for many millions of years, but that human beings or another intelligent land animal existed on the Earth all those eons ago, and the pyramids of Antarctica are the cryopreserved antiquities of their culture. Both possibilities are equally astounding and totally demolish the current dominant paradigm related to the South Polar continent. Antarctica is a tightly controlled zone that is effectively under international military occupation. Travel there is restricted not only by the climate, but the stringent conventions of the 1959 Antarctic Treaty. This is a piece of global legislation that limits all territorial claims to the continent and forbids the exploration of its natural resources such as coal, oil, and minerals. The fact is that the harsh conditions and distance of travel involved would not make mining economically possible anyway, so could the treaty have another purpose? In 2006, a British journalist was contacted by a man who claimed to have the most incredible story to tell. Intrigued, the journalist asked to know more. He met with his nameless contact at a pub in Oxford one evening. The man told the journalist to call him Jack, but that this was not his real name. He then said that he'd been a soldier who'd been involved in a secret war in Antarctica in 1947 to 1948. He had been sent to the icy continent with a British task force to raid a secret base there. The base had been set up about 90 years ago after a European country was taken over by an oppressive regime. The regime had major expansionist ambitions relating to Antarctica and acted as a hideaway for leading political figures once that regime had fallen in the subsequent decade. The base was extremely sophisticated, far bigger and more developed than any of the modern scientific stations there. It had a large section of tunnels dug into the ice, including a secret harbor for submarines through which the entrance was submerged, and the submarines could enter the facility without surfacing and exposing themselves to view. Jack informed the journalist that the remains of the base are still there, as well as discarded vehicles, weapons, and other detritus of war. The battlefield is completely out of bounds for Antarctic visitors. Jack sadly died in 2016, and he claimed to be the last living veteran of that campaign. Many hundreds of men took part, and all of them are now gone, unacknowledged by their government. Jack's tale is interesting when held up in the light of an official and publicly revealed military mission to Antarctica that took place in the southern summer of 1946 to 47, the season before. It was American and known as Operation High Jump. It consisted of a huge force of almost 5,000 men with 13 ships and 33 aircraft. The official objectives of the mission were to establish a scientific base in Antarctica, to train personnel and test equipment in frigid conditions. This makes no sense. A fleet of warships is not necessary to set up a scientific base, and there are plenty of frigid conditions within the United States which could be used for such exercises. Alaska, for example. There is a documentary about Operation High Jump called The Secret Land, which can be seen on YouTube. It was made soon after the expedition by the US Department of Defense. When you watch this film, be aware that you're watching an official United States government production, made on commission by a selected cast and crew with an approved script and production design. This was what the government wishes the public to think happened during Operation High Jump. They are portraying the project the way they want it to be perceived. Did anyone ask some of the relevant questions above? It is clear that the project was really intended to carry out military action in Antarctica, probably against the European regime's surviving assets in the region. For some reason, Antarctica is very important to the ruling classes of the world. What should really be regarded as nothing more than a giant ice cube of no value or purpose other than satisfying the curiosity of scientists has been vigorously fought over, coveted and regulated for close to 100 years. Why? Is it possible there are secrets preserved in the ice that could change our entire viewpoint of humanity and our place on Earth and in the universe? Along with the aforementioned pyramids are reports of possible extraterrestrial activity, both past and present. Several photographs have emerged of strange objects lying on the ice. They may or may not be the products of an alien race. Crashed UFOs, perhaps? Are they the Antarctic Roswell? Perhaps the mysterious snow-covered pyramids themselves were built not by ancient human beings, but visiting ETs, maybe the same who built the Cydonia complex on Mars. There are more and more people with credible credentials speaking out in violation of security oaths with astonishing accounts. They say that the government is secretly excavating an ancient city encased in the Antarctic ice cap. In 2016, generally a very turbulent year, a series of strange activities took place on Antarctica, a list of coincidences long enough to be noteworthy. It felt almost as if the level of covert activities broke through the pre-existing ceiling. Patriarch Kirill, head of the Russian Orthodox Church, landed at the Russian research base of Bellingshausen, gave a mass in the famous Temple of the Holy Trinity, the most southerly church in the world. At the same time, the Apollo astronaut Buzz Aldrin visited the Amazon Scott base on the geographical South Pole and had to be urgently evacuated. A few days later, according to an Argentine newspaper, President Obama went missing for a few hours and his Secretary of State John Kerry survived a bicycle crash that looked like an assassination attempt. The truth about Antarctica needs to be exposed, but it could turn out to be one of the most difficult revelations of all. The continent perfectly embodies the catchphrase, out of sight, out of mind. But difficult does not always equal impossible. Beneath the permafrost and ice cap may lie knowledge that will transform the planet. Ben Emlyn Jones is the author of Roswell Rising, Roswell Revealed, and Roswell Redeemed, a trilogy of novels exploring the possibility and effects of UFO disclosure in fictional form.